Hey there, this is Ryan Kingslien, founder of ZBrushWorkshops. So I get asked questions at ZBrush Central all the time. One of them that came up that I think is really important to make sure I touch on is how to take a 3D model. Something like this guy here. This is a sculpt for a Thor maquette that I'm working on. How do you take this 3D model and convert that into a relief like this? Add a background and do a whole bunch of other things. Let me show you this without the material and just with the matte cap gray. You can see what we're doing here is just extruding this out. So let me walk you through the steps for creating this. The first thing that you need to do, and this is really where the whole thing pivots, because if you don't do this step, you're not going to get enough detail. But you have got to go up to your document and you've got to increase your width and height. So let's just do that right now. I'm going to set width to 2000, height to 2000. Now in order to be able to adjust these separately or independently of the aspect ratio, you have to turn Pro off. So make sure that's off, 2000, and then resize. Just hit yes, okay, and it messes up your canvas. Control N so that it's completely clean. And then zoom out so you can see it. Okay. Now draw your model on the screen and put it in the position that you're going to eventually want the this image or this relief to be in. So choose whatever works. Let's go straight towards us. And try to fill up all of it. You don't want to leave too much extra space laying around. That's not necessarily the best. This is okay though. I'd say this much extra room is fine. Once you've done that, then go up, drop out of edit mode. Just drop out of it entirely. Okay, now you need to avoid clicking on the canvas because then you draw more of these guys. And then the next thing you do is you open up the tool pop-up and you select the Klingon tool of death, the MRGBZGrabber. It sounds dangerous, it sounds crazy, and it sounds actually like it's in Czech. But it's very simple once you get a sense of what it's doing. M is for material, RGB is for color, Z is for pause, Z depth. So it's just grabbing it all. Got to think like a programmer. So select that tool, and then come all the way outside of the canvas and grab the whole thing. But make sure that you've done one thing. I forgot to mention this to you. Turn auto crop off. If that's not off, then it will create an unevenly sized alpha. So look at my alpha and the width and height and notice that they're no longer square. That's going to cause me some issues. So make sure you keep them square. Auto crop is on. Grab another one. There you go. 2000 by 2000. That's what we need. Now you don't want to work with a canvas that's this size. It's a little intense on your computer. So just click New Document. Don't save it. Save it. Don't save it. Up to you. And now what we want to do is select a plane. So we're going to click the tool pop-up. We're going to select a polyplane. Draw it on. Go into edit mode. Then we're going to go to divide, or actually we're going to first click make poly mesh. And then that changes all the geometry options. And that's important. It has to be a poly mesh. Divide till it's about 1,000,000 for this example. And something that I get asked a lot as well is what's a really good subdivision level to work at? So subdivision level is relative. It has no absolute value per se. So subdivision level is not what you want to be mindful of. What you want to be mindful of is that polygon count that you see in this large thumbnail. It says polys equal basically 1,000,000 polygons. That's the thing that you need to be thinking about and worrying about because you need enough of those to capture the detail. So let's go about setting this up. I'm going to turn perspective on. going to start with a standard brush, and I'm going to start with, let's say drag rectangle, and the alpha I want is going to be alpha 09. But I don't want to just draw this on because it's kind of thick, and that's not a very nice shape. So I'm going to go into alpha adjust, and I'm going to make that a little bit of a hard shape. Might blur it slightly. I've got my blur set to 1. And then try it. Not bad, but Z intensity is too much. Okay, not bad, but make sure your focal shift is hard. The blur is taking the hardness out of it. So let's go here. And I'm going to add some thickness. There. Let's try blur now with that. There, that's a little better. Not exact, but a little better. Okay, so we started out with just the overall shape that I wanted to work within. Now what I want to do is add a background, but at each stage I'm storing a morph target. Store. Okay, and now I'm going to just look real quickly in my textures. And there's already a texture here I can use. So I'm going to select alpha 4, and I'm going to convert that into it's texture 4. I'm going to convert it into an alpha. And this way I can actually use that texture to sculpt with. So you've got to come back up into the alpha palette and just reset that curve. That's important. But you also need to set the blur, because the texture is 8-bit, alphas are 16. So that's like a higher life form talking to a lower life form. It's just not all that. You're missing a lot of information. So alphas are there's a lot of information in there. You don't want to miss that information, or if you do, it starts to leave this kind of JPEG artifacting. So set your blur to 1, you'll be infinitely better off. And in this case, I'm going to switch to Z standard or Z sub. I'm going to lower my Z intensity, get rid of that texture. And my alpha's been stored. I'm going to drag all the way out. Okay. Now if you're going to be using the edges of this, then you can use a real simple trick to just get rid of that sculpting. Select the morph brush and you paint it out. In our case, we're actually not going to use it. So this step isn't that essential for me. But it might be really important for you. So the morph target's going to or the morph brush is going to allow me to just paint back in areas from the other sculpt. Alright, so I'm going to delete and store again. And take this, go back to the standard brush, take that alpha that I created, the depth grab that we did with the Klingon tool of death, and we're going to, we can use drag rectangle. I'm going to use Z sub, but I'm going to amp up my intensity. This is also something you can do and store in a layer. It's up to you. Okay, you want to get that positioned. Is that relief enough or too much? We can dial it back. Yeah, we'll dial that back. And then I'm going to use the morph brush to unpaint these overlapping areas. Had to smooth that before it would allow me to do anything. Not uncommon. And yes, there we go. Okay, So now we've got a basic look. Since we did store this in a layer, we can be turning that on and off. We can have these separate layers. And we can also adjust how far out this is pushing it. Let's go all the way back. You can also polish this. Set the polish really low, like 1. That'll clean up some issues. And then get into actually sculpting all of these individual pieces. But first, I'm going to select the Clip, Circle, Center brush, and just going to clip around the edges. There we go. Put that material on. Starting to look at a little bronze, raw bronze render. You can keep sculpting. And brushes that are really going to help you sculpt are things like Trim Front. This is going to be really good for establishing over and under plane. So if you're a fan of Edward Lanteri, there's some really awesome stuff in his book in terms of how to sculpt relief. But let's just say the ridge muscles are definitely going to go behind the bicep. I'm going to, well, let's just delete the layer. Bake all. I'm going to emphasize that plane with the bicep in front. I'm going to press Alt, and that would allow you to say take a plane and build it up. You can also use Trim Dynamic. That will be nice building areas up, and it'll be a little less dramatic than Trim Front. You can be doing all of this while you're creating a layer or in a layer, so you can have a lot more control in editing it. Here I'm just adjusting the bevel, things that maybe the alpha didn't pick up, or we just weren't able to get. Those are things that may have been in the sculpt or may not. But at this point we're on our own. We're just creating something cool. Let me put the lat back, and let me make sure that the bicep is overlapping that lat. I would actually go in with the standard brush or Damien standard brush and cut that lat in a bit. There. Then I would use Trim Dynamic to start to flatten that out. And it might be that you need to use clay and press Alt and start to develop a plane that we just didn't get. Get that over. Okay, so we've worked out that armpit area. Requires us to really know a little bit about what we're doing. Can keep finessing this. Brushes that will really help are polish brushes. Don't forget to press Alt with polish brushes. It's a pretty cool way to quickly build up planes. It'll also be a little bit more dramatic than Trim Dynamic in some capacity. So you got to be a little careful because we're starting to lose the sensitivity there, but that might also be what you really want. The structure, you might want that to dissipate. So, but you can always come back in with Trim Dynamic to just structure that up. And there you go. So with a little bit of hard work, you're going to be ready. Render that out to show to the client. and you're set to go. Now, if you're watching this, one of the things you might have noticed is that the background showed up in our sculpt with the guy's alpha. So what you might want to do, an alternate to this workflow, it would be to do everything everywhere that I stored a morph target. You just replace that with create a layer. And then before you sculpt, you can just turn the layer off, sculpt into the new, turn all the other layers off, sculpt in the new layer, and then put them back on and see what happens. You can also be removing things from other layers that way with morph targets, things of that nature. So I hope you found this useful, and good luck with all your sculpting.